Hi, everybody, and welcome. I'm Leslie with the New Mexico Small Business Development Center, and I'm here to present Eric Spellman to you, and he is going to present to you 7 powerful offline methods to promote and grow your business. And he just got through telling me that sometimes this is going to be a little different, and sometimes people forget the basics, so this will be a good refresher course for everybody. The New Mexico Small Business Development Center wants to remind New Mexico small businesses to be aware of the risks to their cybersecurity. We have pre-recorded on-demand cybersecurity webinars that are available on our YouTube channel, and I will be chatting over the link to pick that up. Also, if you have any questions, he is great. Last time we got bombarded with questions. He's great at picking up those questions, so make sure you type them into the Q&A. Eric?
Thank you very much, Leslie. Okay, it is time to get started, people. I hope you're ready. Now, if this is one of your first presentations to hear from me, well, first, go back and watch all the others because I think they're good. But second, you need to know this. Don't feel like you have to write down everything you see on the screen because my wonderful host will be happy to send them to you or make them available for you to download this entire presentation. So what I want you taking notes on is how it pertains to you or ideas you get during the presentation that you can use back in your office, back in your business. So let's talk about 7 powerful offline methods to promote and grow your business. Now, when I say offline, let me kind of explain what that means. You know, most of what I talk about is about the internet. It's about social media and websites and things like that. Well, these are going to be some things you can do without being on the internet. Now, will some of these pertain and can they be used on the internet? Of course, but they're all projects and things you can do offline. And they will aid you in your other advertising that has nothing to do with the internet. So I hope you're ready. This is an interesting one, and I think you're going to get a lot of ideas. Number 1, you got to create a logo and a tagline. People, oh my gosh, you started your business. You came up with a great name for it. Everyone's impressed. You got everything laid out. Did you name your business? Did you come up with a logo? Do you have a tagline? Now some of y'all are going, what's the logo and tagline? Let me explain. A logo, if you're just asking, a logo is simply a symbolic representation of your company. It's meant to be seen from a distance so that when you see it from a distance, you immediately associate the name of the company. It's meant as an easy way for people to recognize, and it is probably the most important brand you have. Now remember, it should be completely symbolic. A tagline is different. A tagline is like a little phrase that you want people to think of when they think of your company. It's words. You know, it's kind of like McDonald's, have it your way, you know, or was that Burger King? Ooh. Anyway, that's a tagline. Taglines can change. They can change yearly. But logos, once you pick a logo, you should stick with it. Now, the thing to consider when talking about a logo is where will it be shown? You know, so many people, they go ask their best friend who's a graphic artist or their friend who's an artist or even just a friend to create them a logo. And they don't give them any kind of information about what they want. I'm here to tell you, you need to recognize and be thinking about where that logo will be shown. You need to think that that logo might someday be embroidered on a shirt or a hat. It might be on a sign. It might be on a pamphlet. It might be in black and white. Too many of you are coming up with some crazy multicolored logo, but then when it prints out on a fax or prints out on a black and white copier, it looks like garbage, okay? You need to really be thinking about where your logo is going to be seen. That's why I always recommend this company, okay? 99designs.com. No, I'm not making any money from them. Anyone who wants a logo, that's where I send. Now, some of my graphic designer friends out there aren't happy that I do this, but let me explain why I like this company. You know, a logo, let's just talk about a logo for a second. A logo should be simple. The best logos in the world are not complicated. They're very, very simple. I mean, heck, look at the two on this screen, AT&T and McDonald's, two of the biggest companies out there, and their logos are extremely simple. Why are they so simple? Because they're meant to be seen from a distance and you recognize what they are. When you create a logo with words in it, when you create a logo that has lots of really ornate graphics in it, very complicated, first of all, from a distance, you can't even tell what it is. Second, if you're going to have it put on a shirt, can you imagine how expensive embroidering all those colors into a shirt will be? Some people don't think before they come up with a logo. It should be simple as possible. Look at the Pepsi logo. Heck, look at the Nike logo. And you think these people didn't drop some money on finding a good logo? Come on, people. Look at the simplicity. That is the key to a good logo. And remember, and this is, I'm going to look so hypocritical when I say this, but your name doesn't have to be a part of your logo. I mean, heck, my logo, ericspellman.com, my logo actually has my name kind of in it. And looking back, I kind of wish I hadn't have done that. Okay. A good logo is symbolic, and it needs to be able to be recognized from a great distance. So what ends up happening is you will go to someone because, maybe you're not a graphics person. Maybe you don't think visually like a lot of people. So you go to your graphic designer and you go, you know what? I need a logo for my company. And so they come up with something and you're like, I don't know. You go back and forth and then finally go, well, okay, that's the best I've seen. And you drop $3,000 and move on with your mediocre logo. 99 Designs is different. Here's what actually happens when you go there. And there's other companies too. I just like 99 Designs because they're the biggest and I've gotten the best results from them. But 99 Designs, when you go there, they're going to give you a little test. It's not a test that you can pass or fail. It's more like, tell us about your company. Describe your company. What are your favorite colors? What other, logos do you like from other companies? And they actually have you upload some just so they can see what you're liking and not liking, And it's almost like a psychology test, kind of like if you could be a tree, what kind of tree would you be, kind of stuff. And the questions may seem weird, but I promise if you answer them truthfully, you're going to come up with the most amazing logo. So anyway, they ask you all these questions. You upload logos that you like, and don't worry, they won't copy them. And then what they do is 99 Designs takes that little package, that little request you've made, and they charge you $300. Okay, just a flat $300. And then what they do is they take that package and they submit it to thousands of participating graphic artists around the world. And if the artists want to take it up, they can. And what they will do is they will come up with a logo for you after they kind of read through your answers and see these samples that you did. They will then submit to you sample logos that they could do for you. And people, let me tell you, I usually have logos showing up within hours. Hours. Now, what happens is you start getting a lot. I mean, and they kind of give you a week to get this done. Seriously, you will have a new logo within 7 days. But within the first couple of days, you're probably going to receive the most. These people are fast. And so you're getting logos from all over the world, and you're looking at some of them and you're going, wow, that's kind of good. And others are like, oh my God, that's ugly. And what you can do is you can just start eliminating the ones you don't like. And when you do find the ones you do like, you can then reach out to those people and say, okay, but can you make this blue a little lighter? Can you, make those shapes a little more roundier? You know what I'm saying? You can make requests and they will fix them and send them back. And when you finally find the logo you like, because basically you've been voting the others off the island. When you find the logo that you like, you then say you're the winner because it is a contest. These people are competing for your business. When you pick the one that wins, guess what? They get the majority of the $300. That's why they're so quick. to submit logos to you. And 99 Designs guarantees that they're not ripping off some other logo. So you're safe there. I mean, they go out and check to make sure they're not copying someone else's. And when you get the logo you want, then they hand it off. And then they sign off on all the intellectual property rights, which means you own it outright. They don't keep any part of it. And so basically for 300 bucks, you're having a few hundred people compete and submit different logos to you until you find the one you like. Trust me, everyone who has used this process loves it. Okay. So that's why I like 99 Designs. It's easy, it's good, because when you just depend on one person to come up with a logo for you, you're depending on one perspective. You're depending on one person's view of what a logo should be. With 99 Designs, you're actually getting a lot of different ideas. They can spark other ideas. So anyway, that's why I like 99 Designs. Highly recommend. Once you get that logo, oh my gosh, put it everywhere. It needs to go on every pamphlet, needs to go outside. If you have a brick and mortar location, it needs to go on your signs, needs to go on your shirts. Every piece of paper that comes out of your company needs to have it on there. It needs to be on your website. Heck, your entire website needs to be designed around the logo. Did you know that? The look and feel, that's what we call it. The look and feel of your website should be completely designed around your logo. If your logo is very roundy, like mine is, then your whole website needs to be kind of roundy from a graphic standpoint. The colors in your logo should be reflected in the colors of your website. You see, everything ties together because people, what is the purpose of that logo? Branding. I mean, take a look on this page. I see that little AT&T world. I know it's AT&T every single time. Why? Because everything from TV commercials and mailings and stores and t-shirts on people that I see reminds me that that's AT&T without the words even being on it. And think about it. You're traveling in your car and down that highway, you see them golden arches. You don't have to be able to read that it's McDonald's because heck, you know it's McDonald's. Logos are critical. They truly, truly are. Now to that tagline. The tagline is, like I said, it's a little text phrase and it can change, but I don't recommend changing it like every day or even every week because people need to start associating it with you, kind of like that have it your way. And when you start thinking about it, taglines, everyone has one. Like, do you know Nike's tagline? Just do it. You know, have a Coke and a smile. They're taglines. They're like words that they're trying to associate. And usually what a tagline is they're trying to associate a feeling or one of their core competitive advantages. The whole have it your way was because back in the day, if you ordered a hamburger, you got it the way they gave it to you. And you had to pick off the onions and you had to pick off the lettuce or whatever, you know. But that was one of their competitive advantages. So come up with a tagline, come up with a logo, and then you need to associate them every single place you can. Number 2, offline, get speaking gigs. Now, some of you are going to go, oh my gosh, Eric, I'm out. I ain't getting up in front of a group of people. Hush. You don't get to say that. This is your company and you represent. And you need to truly represent your company by being the spokesperson for that company. But Eric, I get so nervous. Get over it. I'm telling you, when you run a company, you're going to take risks. And this is one of the risks that will pay off big. It really did for me. I was a computer guy. I was a little nerdy guy who was a computer programmer when I first started out. And I got some good advice. And they said, Eric, you need to be comfortable in front of people. If you're ever going to, be a business owner, you've got to be able to stand up and speak. And so I took speech classes and I eventually even joined the speech team in high school. And that truly opened up the world to me. I guess what really started it for me was the Optimist Club. I don't know if y'all still have those, but back in junior high, I was in a competition a little statewide competition, and I realized I can do this. And so you need to get speaking gigs. Now, let me tell you the secret to this, because when I first started out here in Amarillo, to get customers, what I did was I spoke at all the little civic groups. I spoke at the Lions Club and the Oratarians, or what are they called? Anyway, and the Knights of Columbus, all those different groups who have lunches where all the business people are, business owners are. That's where I went. So step one, before you do this, you need to determine who your perfect customer is. Now, we've had this talk before about how to determine your perfect customer, but I'll go through it real quick. Your perfect customer, the way to figure out who your perfect customer is, because remember, when I say, who's your customer? If you say, well, it's everybody, Eric, we sell to everybody. Hush, no, you don't. You don't sell to everybody. No business sells to everybody. That's a lazy answer. You need to focus on who your perfect customer is. And the way to figure that out is to think of your existing customer base now. In fact, I want you to think of one customer by name who you know, and this customer you make the most money from and get the least amount of grief. You know who it is. You know them by name because you love them to death. You make the most money from them and you get the least amount of grief from them. In other words, if you could clone them and just do business with them, you'd be pleased as punch. That's your perfect customer. And once you figure them out, then you need to seek people just like them and everything you do. And you need to find out where those people hang out and what they do and what groups they're associated with and what conferences they go to. Find everywhere that they are. You need to stalk them, okay? Because if you want more people like them, you got to go get them. They're not going to just show up on your doorstep. And that's how you get on the speaking circuit. Basically, what you do is you start calling up. Now, if you're a member of any of these groups, you know how hard it is to get speakers. You just need a speaker for the luncheon. You're a volunteer for your group and you got to sign to help fill that spot. And you know how hard that is. These people are desperate in some cases. They would love it if you would volunteer. And heck, you get a free lunch out of it. Come on. So you're going to call these people up and you can call your local city and say, where are the groups? Who are the different civic groups that we have in this town? And they'll tell you. Call the Chamber of Commerce. Call the city people. They know. And once you find out, you're going to call them up. Now, when you call them up, you're going to say, hey, I'm so-and-so, and I work at, I have this business. And I just want to let you know I'm available if you need a speaker. The topics I can talk about are, now this is key, because here's the deal. You can't go into this thinking you're going to get to stand up there and just do a commercial for your company. No, ma'am. No. You can't do that. They don't want that. They don't want an infomercial on stage. They want something helpful and useful for their members. And that's what you got to realize. You see, when I started it out, I realized the most important person I ever had to impress was the person at that group in charge of speakers. And I had to think, what are they most afraid of? They're afraid of putting someone up there that's going to bore everyone to tears. And what's going to make people like that person is if they put someone up there who really helps their members and gives them a good information. So what I did was I came up with some topics. Now I'm a technology online marketing guy. So my topics were things like, how to make money with your website, how to generate leads, kind of what all these talks have been. And trust me, they liked them. And so they picked me and I went, and they always give you a test. And what I mean by that is they'll give you one shot. And so you go in there and you do your little talk, and you only get like 20 minutes because, they got to do all their little meeting business. Everyone's going to eat first, and then they do their meeting business and all their little let's recognize our members, blah, blah, blah. So in the end, you get about 20 minutes. So you come up with a little 20-minute speech. And don't make it a speech. You need to talk to them. Don't memorize it. Just come up with some talking points. And then wow them. Stand up and wow them, because you got to realize, you know what will motivate you to do this? Realizing that those are all potential future customers. Because when someone gets on stage, you start to assume they're an expert. And remember what I've always said, people would rather do business with an expert than a salesman. I've got more local business by speaking at these groups than just about any other method I used. So get on that speaking circuit, get over your stage fright, and just do it. You represent your company, do it. You can do this, and don't let anyone tell you, including yourself, that you can't. Like I said, you need to educate. Whatever this little speech is, yes, they're going to say, this is Eric Spellman from Spellman and Associates. They're going to mention your company. And at the very end, you need to remind them, and you can do it very quick and, hey, if you have any questions, the way I do it without sounding like an infomercial, I don't say, and for all your online marketing needs, be sure and give me, no, I don't say that. I say, hey, I had so much more I wanted to say. I don't know, you probably have questions that didn't get answered or you weren't comfortable raising your hands, people. But hey, reach out to me, ericspellman.com. I'm happy to help. And that's what I do. I try to establish myself as an expert, not a salesperson. In fact, when you watch me speak at those meetings, I'm not trying to sell you anything. I just want to educate you. And that's what actually comes across. But here's the secret. You need to get their email. Now, here's the secret to getting people's email. At the beginning of the talk, you pass around a sheet of paper and it says for a copy of Eric's presentation. Now, what I do is I use PowerPoint, okay? So whenever I do one of mine, I have a little PowerPoint I set up. And so I say, hey, for a copy of this presentation, just put your email down. But it also says for a copy of this presentation and other tips by Eric Spellman, put your email down. And I just start passing it around. And as I speak, and people are like going, oh, okay, he knows what he's talking about. I'll get about 40 to 50 email addresses per meeting. And people, that's the real value. That's the real value of that whole thing, because then you can start emailing them because you got permission. Own the press. This is a big one. I learned this one just out of the blue. No one taught me this one. There's a little thing called the Golden Rolodex. Every reporter out there, and what I mean is local TV reporter. Used to be newspaper also, but not anymore. So every local TV reporter in your city or in the nearby big city, you got to realize these people aren't, it's like, how do they know where to get experts? They don't. They have no clue. So when a major story hits and they want local perspective, they want a local expert's opinion on it, what do? Well, every reporter has a little, what I call the Golden Rolodex. Now, the Golden Rolodex is a list of people and topics. So whenever there's for instance, here in Amarillo, whenever there was a topic about computers back in the beginning, and the internet, because it was just coming online, what I did was I started making friends with the reporters. These young little reporters who just got hired, don't know garbage, trying to impress everybody with their skills. So I would take them pizza. I would just say, hey, and then I would say, hey, if you ever need, information about this, I'm available. I would get to know them. I would create relationships with those reporters. And then guess what? They started calling me. Looks like we just got a question. With gathering emails at the beginning of the meeting, do you have to let them know they're agreeing to being added to your mailing list? I've heard they're concerned. Yes, that's a great question. You cannot just add people's emails to your email list without their permission. Okay, that goes back to the CAN-SPAM Act of 1996. And so that's why when I pass around the sheet, it does mention that they will also receive other tips. Now, I don't like calling it a newsletter because everyone hates newsletters. Don't ever use that word. And so when I'm speaking, I'll also say, hey, and I have a whole bunch more tips I can't tell you today, but I'd be happy to send them to you. I send out some emails, and you see what I'm saying? So yes, you got to make sure they know. Make it obvious. So that's a great question. Okay. So the reporters would then start calling me whenever a national story and they needed local perspective. And they would bring me into the studio and do a little interview, or they would come to my office, would bring a camera crew and do a little interview. And here's the deal. The second I started showing up on TV here in Amarillo, oh my gosh, you would have thought the floodgates opened. I had all these businesses suddenly contacting me. Because why? Because we assume that if you're on the news, you're an expert. Uh-uh. You're on the news because a reporter knows your name. Got it? I was no expert, but people thought I was. Okay? And so that's what I'm saying. You need to get on the golden Rolodex. You need to be best friends with these reporters. Now, when you do this, offer content, not infomercials. The reporter will give you a byline, under the TV thing with your company name and whatever. People will figure that out. Don't say, come by my office. Don't say blah, blah, blah. Don't turn this into a commercial, because the reporters hate that and they'll never use you again. So when they interview you, you need to look straight in that camera. And that's another key. Sometimes the reporters will say, look at me when we interview, but every once in a while you need to glance at that camera in the lens, because when you look in the lens of that camera, guess what? You're looking in the eyes of the people watching you, and you tell them what's what, and how the cow ate the cabbage. Gosh, that's such an old saying. And if you act confident and you tell them that, and see, when people watch me, you know what I tell them? I say, and folks, if you don't do this, you will fail. Yeah, I say stuff direct like that. Don't act wishy-washy. You act confident, because people are attracted to passion. Oh, I want to tell you so much about how you need to have passion. But anyway, offer content, not infomercials. Be proactive. The only way you're going to get on the golden Rolodex is if you go after it. So find your ABC affiliate, your CBS affiliate, your NBC affiliate. Find out who the reporters are. That's so easy to do. Just go to their website. And then bring them pizza one day. Offer to take them to lunch. If a story comes up that you would have been great for, call them about it. You need to be proactive about this. But I'm telling you, once you get on the Rolodex, guess what? You get called for everything. And it is the best free advertising you will ever get. Number 3, solicit emails at the cash wrap. If you have a brick and mortar location, you got to remember, the happiest your customers will ever be is when they're checking out. They have their product. They can't wait to get home and open it. They're paying you. That is the happiest they will ever be. Which is the perfect time to ask for their email. And once you start sending these emails, it's going to remind them who you are and put you at the top, in the top of mind awareness. Top of mind awareness basically means that for your industry, when they think of a need, that when a customer thinks of a need that they have, you're the first one that comes to mind. It's kind of like pizza. Oh, I want pizza. Who's the first company you think of? Well, it could be different for everybody. For me, it's Domino's. But that's only because they have basically been branding themselves 24/7 with me. So I associate pizza with Domino's. That's what you want for your company. For what you do, you need to be, your company name needs to be associated with that. And so newsletters do that. Email newsletters, don't call them newsletters, do that. The key is to ask the right question when they check out, okay? And you're noticing that large companies do this. I mean, heck, even restaurants do this. No, they don't. Yes, they do. But they don't call it an email newsletter, do they? Restaurants call it a birthday club. Uh-huh. When you hear birthday club, you think email newsletter. That's how they do it. They offer you incentive for that email address. You get a free little dessert for half price, free meal even on your birthday, because they know you're going to come with other people. No one celebrates their birthday by themselves. Think about it. They're going to make money. So call it the right thing and ask the right question. So let's say that you sell clothing. Sorry, I get passionate. My mouth gets dry. Let's say you sell clothing or something. So they're purchasing their stuff and you go, you know what? We have our VIP buyers club and they always get our discounts before everyone else. Would you like to receive those discounts too? Well, sure. All I need is your email address. Boom. You got it. You have to give them an incentive. Okay. If you just say, would you like to join our newsletter list? No one's going to say yes. Ain't no one want more email in their inbox. but they will take a coupon. And don't spam people. Don't ever buy this kind of goes back to the question that was already asked. Don't ever go out and buy a list of email addresses, folks. That's illegal. And you can get fined up to $10,000 per email address. I'm serious as a heart attack here. Don't ever do that. If anyone says they could sell you a list of email addresses, you got to realize that is illegal. Don't you ever do it. You know, I have thousands upon thousands. I think I'm up to like 17, 18,000 email addresses now. I got every one of them one at a time. One at a time. I've spoken at a lot of groups. I've gone to a lot of conferences and got a ton of email addresses there. And a lot of people just sign up for it on my website. But I got them all one at a time. And I don't have time to go over how to do all this, but if you're going to start sending out an email newsletter, you need to use a program like MailChimp or Constant Contact. That way you won't get blocked as a spammer. And also you can look at stats on who's opening it, who's not. It just makes it so much easier to send out huge amounts of email without getting labeled a spammer. Okay. Number 4, choose the right domain. Now some of you are going, Eric, you said this was offline. That sure looks online. Oh, hush. When I say choose the right domain, I mean you need to sit down, not on the internet, and do this little exercise. The right domain. Now, what's a domain? A domain is your .com. Okay. It is your address. It is the address, you know, at the end of your email address, you know, like mine, eric@ericspellman.com, or your website address, ericspellman.com. The domain itself is the something.com. Those two parts. That is called a domain. Okay. Now, it should always be a .com. Don't you dare go with a .net. Don't you dare go with a .org if you can avoid it, or you know .biz. And when people start sending in these emails going, oh, do you want the .ch version of your name? Do you want the this version of your name? You better own them all before someone else gets it. Hush. That's garbage. It should be .com, period. .com, period. But Eric, my competitor got the .com, so I got the .net. Oh my gosh, what a mistake you just made. Because you got to realize, you can tell people .net all day long and they're still going to put .com, and you just send them to your competitor. Don't ever do that. You get the .com. And it should be easy to say, no spelling necessary. And don't you put hyphens in it, dashes. You know what I'm saying? Don't put dashes in it. You know, because legally they're allowed. Technically they're allowed. But the problem is if you put a dash in it, then you have to tell people there's a dash in it. Most people just run the words together and they'll do it and they'll skip the dash. So don't use it, even though it's possible to say. I would rather have a longer domain that's easy to say than a short abbreviation that's impossible to remember. It can also be service-based. Remember, it doesn't have to be your company name, okay? Your .com does not have to be your company name. It can be what you do. It can be the kind of products you sell. You know, think about a law firm. You know, Peterson, Ferries, Dories, and Jones. Imagine if you had to remember that .com, Peters, Ferries, Dories, Jones.com. No one can even do that. I would rather it be something like getmeoutaofjail.com. Easy to remember. Also, remember it's case insensitive. In other words, the case of your domain does not matter. So when you put it on business cards, when you put it on printing and billboards, make sure what I recommend is that if it's multiple words, you capitalize the first letter of each word so that your eye can more easily break it apart. Don't ever do it in all uppercase. Don't ever do it in all lowercase. We'll talk about that in a minute. Just remember, you can type it in uppercase, lowercase, it'll still work. Oh, and when you're picking your .com, take your time, people, because there are landmines you could run into. I had this one lady, she said, Eric, I went ahead and got the perfect domain, the perfect .com. I'm creating a site where lawyers can all get together and talk to each other. And I said, what's the name of this? And I said, what's the name of your .com? What is it? And she goes, it's lawyersexchange.com. And I said, no, you can't do that. She said, why? I said, write it out. Oops, let's go back. Take a look. She'd never written it out. Some of you were laughing out there. She'd never written it out. You need to write it out and see what it's going to look like before you choose it. Number 5, get testimonials and reviews. Oh, this is key. You got to realize that the number one barrier to people contacting you for anything is called the trust barrier. They just don't trust you. They don't know you. Okay. And you may be the most trustworthy person in the world, but they don't know who you are, so they don't trust you. One of the best ways to earn that trust is by having other people say that you're worth doing business with. Okay. Now, what's the difference between a testimonial and a review? Well, a testimonial is typically something that it's always positive. A good testimonial is always positive. And it speaks to one of your competitive advantages. In other words, what makes you better than your competitors. A review is people who've already done business with your company, and they can be good or bad. And people will just give them to you. Now, you got to understand what a good testimonial is. Some of you think, oh, I'll just take some of my good reviews and use them as testimonials. No, that's not how this works. And let me just tell you something. And some of you are going to hang up on this whole talk when you hear me say this, because what I'm about to tell you is going to sound unethical. Some of you just perked up, didn't you? But I'm here to say, if you stick with me to the end, you'll understand that it is completely above board, because what I'm about to teach you is a secret that national companies know, and this is how they get testimonials. It's not what you think. So stick with me, because in the middle, it's going to sound like it's not morally right, but follow with me, okay, till the end. You got to realize that a customer is never going to give you the perfect testimonial. What you're going to get are people saying things like, oh, they have great customer service, I love it. That is an awful testimonial. Because first of all, customer service has no value anymore, because everyone claims to have it. Customer service is not what drives you into a company. So we got to realize that a good testimonial reminds people what one of your competitive advantages is. Now remember, a competitive advantage is something that makes you different from your competitors. Because if I don't know your industry, then the only thing I have to measure you by your competitors is what? Price. That's it. Now, you and I both know I shouldn't do that. That there are other factors. But I don't know what those factors are. Why? Because I'm an ignorant customer. Ignorance is not a bad thing. It just means I don't know. So how do you secretly teach me what makes you different? Through testimonials. Okay. So here's your homework tonight. Tonight, or even right after this talk, I want you to sit down and write out 5 of your competitive advantages. 5 things, and price might be one of them, that make you better than your competitors. You know, maybe you use higher quality ingredients. Maybe your staff is better trained. Maybe you have more locations than anybody else. You know what I'm saying? There's something that makes you better. Okay. And I want you to come up with 5 of them. Then, and here comes the scary part, I want you to write 5 testimonials, 1 for each of those competitive advantages. Now, a good testimonial is only 2 to 3 sentences at the most. We don't need a letter of recommendation, okay? 2 to 3 sentences max. Because remember, everyone on the internet has ADD, and ain't no one going to read a full page testimonial. So 2 to 3 sentences. So let's say it's a bakery. And so a good testimonial might be, they locally source their organic wheat. I wouldn't use anybody else. That's a perfect testimonial. And it speaks to a competitive advantage. Okay. So you're going to write 5 of these. And you're like, but those aren't real. You're right. They're not legit yet. Then once you write them, you're going to call up 5 of your customers that you actually know. And you're going to say, hey, can I read you something? And you're going to read that testimonial to them and say, is this how you feel about me? Would you mind if I put your name on that? Would you give me permission to put your name on that? Maybe put it on my website or, and of course they're going to say yes. They're going to say, yeah, that's exactly how I feel about your company. Of course. That's how national companies do it. And that's because if you sit around and wait for a customer to give you a testimonial, they'll never do it. They'll either give you garbage about how nice you are, or they won't, or they'll give you something that's of no use whatsoever, or they'll forget and not even do it. If you use my technique and the national company technique, which is what I just showed you, you could have this done by tomorrow. Okay. And yeah, it's completely legit. Why? Because you got attribution permission. That's how you do it. Number 6, encourage social. Now, what is that? And this actually happens outside of the internet, because some of y'all are going, wait a minute, I see the Facebook logo, Eric. You said it was offline. You're right. And what I'm about to recommend to you happens offline. The key is to get people talking, okay? And talking about you. Because if you just rely on your own promotional efforts, trust me, you're going to get blue in the face, because you're basically a megaphone just shouting out to everyone, here we are, come buy from us. What you really need is other people recommending you, kind of where the testimonials go. Because remember, you realize, and by the way, people say, well, where do I put the testimonials? Kind of going back to that last slide. You know where you put the testimonials? Everywhere. Anything you have printed, you put a testimonial on it. I want every page of your website to have a testimonial somewhere on there. Everything I read about you needs to have an example of someone saying, I love doing business with this company. Because what ends up happening is you're lowering that trust barrier to where people can get over it. And trust me, once they start to trust you, and once they believe that other people are, happy with it, they're going to buy from you. Heck, how did Amazon do it? In reviews? You're going to get good reviews and bad reviews. And I don't have time to talk about how to deal with the bad reviews. That's actually a whole nother topic. But I will tell you this, you'll get reviews. And you want to know why Amazon posts the reviews, and you want to know why reviews are so important, is because it lowers the trust barrier. The barrier that people create when they visit a website they've never been to before, that somehow they've got to get over if they're going to buy anything. So testimonials and reviews will help do that. But I'm here to tell you, testimonials are the big one, because you can publish those everywhere. You're going to use those in print. You're going to use those online. But the point is, you also need to go into social, get them talking. So when people are checking out, let's say you actually have a store, a brick and mortar store. What did I tell you about the happiest they will ever be with you? Right. When they're handing you their Visa. Okay. You need, and it's at that moment, you need to invite them to go like your business page on Facebook. Okay. Which hopefully you have set up. And you could even have a little machine right there. You could have a little machine set up right there that they can go to and log in, or they can pull out their phone. Here, let me back up just one point before I go into that. There was a yogurt place here in Amarillo, and it's gone now. But when it first came out, and it lasted for a number of years, when it first came out, they became the #1 frozen yogurt place in all of Amarillo. Froyo, remember that? Frozen yogurt. And the way they got so famous was totally by using what I'm telling you now. What happened was, I was on Facebook and I noticed that a whole bunch of my friends had checked in from Frazzleberries. That was the name of it. So-and-so checked in from Frazzleberries. Tom checked in from Frazzleberries. And I went, what the heck is going on? And finally, curiosity just killed me. So I went to Frazzleberries, and lo and behold, there was a sign above their door, and it said, like us on Facebook and 25% off your order. And by like, they meant like their page so that you could get updates. Okay. Not like a post. Okay. And so that's what people would do. They would get in line, they'd pull out their phone, they would like the Frazzleberry page, and show that phone that they did that to at the cash wrap. And they got 25% off of what, a $3 yogurt? And within 2 weeks, they had 4,000 likes. 2 weeks. But all during that time, they kept pushing it out to the internet. It's the best free advertising they ever did. Now, if you're going to post something on social media, you got to remember on your business page, make it interesting. You got to realize what the ingredients are. Okay. First, you're going to have a picture. Okay. It's going to make them stop. Then the call to attention. The call to attention. And I've talked to you about this before. The call to attention is basically what you're posting about. The call to action is what you want them to do based on what you just told them. And the call to interaction is getting them to comment. Because what have I always told you? If you want to know if you're good at social media, you always count the number of comments under your post, not the likes, not the shares, not any of that. You count the number of comments. Your goal is to encourage social, get people talking about you. That's how you brand. Let's see, here's a question from Claudina. Should I ask them to connect with me on LinkedIn since they are my primary? I'm not the biggest fan of LinkedIn unless you're a headhunter. LinkedIn is primarily for helping people with jobs. It's very white collar, but most people don't hang out on LinkedIn. They update their resume and leave. So I'm not the biggest fan of LinkedIn at all, unless your job is to find people for jobs. So no, Facebook is going to be your bigger general kind of place to do this. Great question. Okay. Number 7, use amazing pictures. And I mean for your print too. Okay. This is for your print. It's for your website, social media, billboards. You got to realize the pictures are everything. People are very visual. And what do they say? Pictures are worth 1,000 words. And here's why I like to say, this is one of my favorite things I like to tell people. I would rather have no photo than a bad photo. Listen, you know what I'm talking about. How many times you've been to a website and the photos on it, it looked like they were all done with Uncle Harold's handy cam. Okay? It makes you look cheap. Makes you look like you don't know what you're doing. And restaurants are the worst. Oh my gosh. I hate it when a restaurant decides they can take a picture of their own food and they put it online. Ooh, I swear. How many times have you, like, there's some Mexican restaurants here in Amarillo, little ones that built a little cheap website and they took their own photos of their food and you can see the grease puddles and the lettuce looks a little wilted. And the colors don't pop and there's no steam coming off of it. So it looks cold. You got to realize that taking pictures of food is a gift, is a talent that you do not possess. If you're going to hire a professional photographer in your restaurant, and trust me, every major restaurant does this, you've got to find someone who knows how to photograph food, because trust me, and maybe you don't even know this, what they're taking a picture of isn't real food. That food was designed and the steam coming off of it was put in order to make food look good in print, on a website, wherever. It has to be created. Okay? Don't ever take a picture of your own food. But I don't mean that. Well, if you're going to take a picture of the inside of your business, then every bit of it better be lit. I can't tell you how many times I've seen these homegrown pictures and it looks like they live in a cave because most people don't understand lighting. Consider stock photography. I mean, take a look at the picture on this page. That's stock. I don't know who those people are. They're probably not even related to each other, but they both have blue eyes and they both look healthy and they both look happy. You see, and it looks professional. That's called a stock photo. Okay. And it doesn't have to represent your business as long as it communicates an idea. So consider stock photography in some cases. If you're going to photograph outdoor things, like maybe you rent cabins, maybe you're a touristy kind of place. Never take pictures of a house or a cabin or Outside pictures on a cloudy day. I don't want clouds in the sky at all. Not one cloud. You know, because here's the deal. Clouds create shadows. And shadows are dark. And shadows aren't happy. And clouds are rain. There's negatives. Sunny days only, people. Because I'm here to tell you, it's all about light, 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 light. If you're going to, like, for instance, if you want to take a picture of the inside of a room, like maybe you're selling a house, maybe you're a realtor, or you're renting a cabin, you want to take pictures inside the cabin, then you need to set up lights inside the cabin so that there is not one shadow anywhere. Because no one wants to go on vacation and live in a cave. Well, those were the 7, but I'm going to give you a bonus. And it has to do with your business card. So take a moment and pull out your business card right now. That's right, you. Yeah. The one looking at me going, does he really mean that? Yes. Pull out your business card. Okay. And if you don't have one, shame on you. Pull out that business card. I want you to look at your email address and your website, which had better be on that business card, by the way. Are they in all uppercase? All lowercase? If so, that's a mistake. They should be in mixed case. Okay. Remember mine, ericspellman.com, where I capitalize the E and capitalize the S? You see, when they're all uppercase or they're all lowercase, the letters are all the same height. And so it's difficult for your eye to break apart the patterns or even break apart the words if there are multiple words. But when you capitalize the first letter of each word, it makes it much easier to read. So if you're ever going to create a banner for like a stadium or a billboard, capitalize the first letter of each word and it becomes a lot more readable because you're basically teaching them how to read it. But here's the biggest trick of all. Use the back of the card. Flip your card over. Is there anything on it? Probably not. First, you could use your business cards as a coupon. Turn it into a coupon and incentivize them to actually come in the business. You know, make it a buy one, get one. Make it a something, you know, give them a reason to actually come in. You can also use it to generate leads. In other words, you could use it to get them to your website. You know, you could make an offer like, you know, go read our number, like if you're a realtor, you know, go read our #1 report, top 10 mistakes you can't afford to make when choosing a realtor at our website, blah, 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 blah. Make an incentive. And what that does is then they'll go there. And we already talked about how to generate leads and the trade and all that. So this gets them started on that path to end up being a lead for you. You know, most business cards just get thrown away. You want this business card to work for you. And just like your website that we've talked about, it needs to be a lead generating machine. So make your business cards work for you. I'll even give you an example of this. Little restaurant in Amarillo is the last thing we'll talk about. Little restaurant in Amarillo named Leal's. Okay. Now, Victor Leal is a friend of mine. And one day, Victor came up to me and he handed me a stack of his business cards. And I thought, why is my friend giving me a stack of his business cards? I know who he is. I know how to get a hold of him. And he said, look at the back. So I did. And on the back, it said, get a free queso on your next visit. Okay, so he did the coupon thing, right? But here's where he took it another step. He said, Eric, I want you to put your initials in the top corner of every one of those business cards. Just put ES in the top corner. And I said, why? And he goes, that way, when you hand them out, if someone actually brings it in and uses it, I'll know it came from you. And so what ended up happening was, sure, I handed out his business cards because I was giving people free queso. And every once in a while, Victor would call me up and say, hey, just want to thank you for handing out my cards. Come in and get a free meal. Do you see what he was doing? He turned me, one of his customers, into a salesman for him. he incentivized me to actually hand out those business cards because I get a little reward if people actually use it. Pretty cool, huh? Well, here's where we have questions. Anything we've gone over at all?
While we're waiting for questions, I want to remind everyone that we have all kinds of webinars coming up, and we have Eric with some more webinars, and everything that he talks about builds from one webinar to the other. So just coming up next week, we have three sales essentials to retain customers. That's coming up. We have Eric, does your logo and tagline stack up? We have basic steps to starting a business. We have a bilingual session on accessing financial resources and transitioning to the new normal. We have cash management for your small business. And then we have Eric going to finish out the week with cryptocurrency. Is that right for your business? So just wanted to remind everyone that there's a lot on the books, and you will be able to sign up for those soon.
Okay, a lot of people say listening to me is like drinking from a fire hose, so I'm sure you're feeling a little overwhelmed. Now remember, because my wonderful hosts are recording this session, you can, and if you missed some of my other sessions, you can go back and watch any of them, and I highly recommend that you do. Just go to their website, nmspdc.org, and you can find all of them.
And if we don't have any questions, I guess that's it for today. We will, I hope everyone has a great rest of your week. I hope we see you next time. We do have a question coming up, if Eric wants to pick that up.
Okay, thank you, Jim. He said great information. Thanks again. My pleasure.
Always great information. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.